Is this a joke? Commander Zivak squinted at the hologram, his tendrils twitching with confusion. You're telling me humans were the first warriors of the galaxy? The council chamber buzzed with skepticism. Around the vast circular table sat representatives from 15 of the galaxy's most advanced species, each one staring at the small hologram of a human soldier in ancient armor. A red dust floated around the figure, making its hardened expression seem almost threatening. The scientist beside Zivak cleared his throat, adjusting his spectacles with one of his claws. There is no mistake, Commander. According to the evidence, humans were the origin of interstellar combat strategy. They developed warfare independently on their homeworld for thousands of years before ever contacting another species. They fought each other relentlessly. Several murmurs broke out, echoing through the chamber as the alien delegates exchanged uneasy glances. The concept was absurd. Humans were the last race admitted to the galactic Concord. They were backward, barely crawling out of their solar system when the rest of the galaxy was exploring nebulas and building Dyson spheres. Zalvax tried to keep his voice steady, although something about the hologram's gaze seemed to penetrate his own. And what of their technology? Surely, this warrior history didn't lead to advancements. The scientist gestured, and a new image appeared above the table, a human battlefield thousands of years old. Metal weapons, crude explosives, and war machines sprawled across the land. The soil was scarred, but beneath it, the foundations of a sophisticated strategy glimmered. On the contrary, the scientist said, humanity's technology advanced precisely because of their conflicts. Every technological leap was driven by warfare, armor, weaponry, tactics. They moved from throwing sharpened sticks to designing machines capable of destroying entire cities in just a few thousand cycles. A voice broke the silence, harsh and skeptical. If humans were so powerful, growled Yarrick, the Zarnak representative, his spiny head quivering with disdain, why did they not dominate the galaxy ages ago? Why were they confined to that rock of theirs? The scientist hesitated. They were isolated. By the time they reached the stars, the rest of us were already here. But he trailed off, his expression dimming. There is something else. An old tale from their culture. A story they tell to this day. They call it sleeping dragons. A shiver passed through the room, though none could explain why. Zalvax's scales tightened. Explain this sleeping dragon. The scientist looked around, gauging the room before continuing. It's a belief that humans carry. The idea that power does not need to be displayed constantly. They are a patient species, but their history shows a capacity for ferocity that lies dormant until it's needed. They describe themselves as dangerous only when provoked, as if their nature waits coiled. Let me get this straight. Zivak tapped a clawed finger on the table, exasperated. They fought each other for millennia, wasted resources, even developed technology to enhance destruction, yet claimed to be peaceful? The scientist nodded. Yes, their records show restraint. Their wars were devastating, but often they ended through negotiation, compromises. Humanity has long held a balance between warfare and diplomacy, perhaps out of necessity. After all, they fought among themselves long before they encountered any of us. Yarrick sneered, his bony teeth glinting. So, we're to believe they're a race of deadly pacifists? Not pacifists, the scientist's voice dropped. Not quite. It's something more controlled. A balance that other species don't practice. Perhaps because they never needed to. And, until now, humans had no one to fight but each other. At that, a new hologram appeared. It was a human soldier again, this time in modern armor. A sleek helmet with a visor reflecting the room's dim light. Across his chest were strange symbols, representing past battles or ranks, a tradition apparently passed down over centuries. Zivak watched the soldier's face with a frown. Why are we seeing this now? The scientist closed the hologram, leaving the chamber in silence. He spoke gravely. Because we've been monitoring them. We believe we could influence, perhaps control their integration into the galactic Concord by limiting their exposure to other worlds, by assigning them to non-combat roles. Zalvax's eyes narrowed. Are you suggesting they found out? Yes, the scientist admitted. And now we suspect they may retaliate. A low hum filled the room as the gravity of the statement settled over the council members. Retaliate. Such a notion was almost inconceivable among the galactic species, who solved disputes with words, trade agreements, or arbitration. Retaliation in the human sense seemed almost barbaric. Yet the evidence suggested humanity was more than capable of it. They could retaliate against us? Zalvax's voice betrayed the first glimmer of doubt. He, like so many others, had seen humanity as a minor species, barely worth the resources spent managing their integration. The scientists looked down. They are no longer confined to Earth. Their ships are primitive but effective. Their soldiers are skilled, and they are resilient in ways we've never anticipated. Commander Zivak scoffed, trying to regain composure. Resilient? How? The scientist activated one final image. It was recent footage taken by a cloaked scout on Earth. The camera panned over a war zone where human soldiers moved with precise coordination. Even amid explosions and gunfire, they communicated in whispers, hand signals, and silent gestures. One soldier fell, only for another to pull him up and continue unbroken. The council members watched, unnerved, as a human soldier limped away from an explosion, wounded yet determined to keep going. They seemed to have an unyielding will to continue, as if they feed off adversity rather than fear it. Yarrick finally looked away. Why do we fear them? He muttered half to himself. The scientist's voice was solemn. Because we misjudged them, Commander. We assumed they were simply latecomers, but in reality, they have been preparing for conflict far longer than we've existed. They understand pain, loss, sacrifice, all as part of their existence. Yarrick's laughter sliced through the tension, forced and grating. So they endured hardship. They're only organic beings, bound by their flesh. What can they do against fleets, shields, planets guarded by the Concord? The scientist didn't answer directly, but his gaze was steady. They may surprise us. For millennia, we have prided ourselves on peace, diplomacy, avoidance of war. But these humans, they perfected conflict. They know how to strategize, to fight for survival in ways we abandoned long ago. The council members sat silent, each absorbed in the uncomfortable truth unveiled before them. Humanity, the species they had considered naive, inferior, backward, had evolved from a history soaked in blood, loss, and tenacity. Are we preparing for war? Zalvax's voice was barely audible, but every word echoed in the stillness of the council chamber. The scientist paused, reluctant. It's not yet confirmed, Commander, but our analysts have detected increased military activities around human-controlled space. They've fortified their planetary defenses and seem to be mobilizing their fleets. Nothing outwardly aggressive, but their movements suggest preparation. Yarrick scoffed, his scales rippling with disdain. They can prepare all they want. Primitive technology, limited resources, and their largest ships are dwarfed by our cruisers. Let them fortify. It will only delay the inevitable. These, the scientists began, are historical records of human warfare. Notice how each century, their tactics evolved, adapted. They faced threats beyond their technology's limits but managed to turn these limitations into advantages, traps, ambushes, calculated risks. Humans learned to strike from behind, using every weakness in their enemy defenses. They made war an art. A representative from the Orloth species, a blue-skinned creature with webbed hands, raised a question. But they have limits, do they not? We have analyzed their biology. They are vulnerable, restricted by their physical forms. Their fleets are few, and their bodies are weak by comparison to ours. The scientist nodded. Yes, they are limited physically, but they have a particular resolve. The concept may seem foreign to us, but they have been conditioned over centuries to face obstacles they are not suited for. They call it adaptation, while other species avoid unfavorable conditions. Humans actively confront them, even seeking out challenges for their own growth. Zivak bristled. What are you implying? The scientist's voice dropped to a grave tone. That for humans, weakness is not a deterrent. They thrive on it. They have developed an instinct to overcome, not in spite of adversity, but because of it. Yarrick chuckled darkly. You're making them sound invincible. They are still contained by their own shortcomings, aren't they? The scientist looked back at him, an unreadable expression in his eyes. Perhaps, but it is precisely their drive to overcome that makes them unpredictable. You see, they have a saying, the best weapon against an enemy is a mind willing to win at any cost. And from what we've gathered, they take this idea to heart. The room went silent. The council members were visibly unnerved. Zalax, trying to restore some sense of authority, clenched his fists and sat up straight. So, what do you recommend, then? If they are as capable as you say, what course of action should the Concord take? The scientist considered this, then answered slowly, choosing his words carefully. Isolation may no longer be feasible. We must approach them with caution. Ensure we do not give them cause to unify against us. A species like humanity doesn't need overwhelming numbers or superior technology. They need only a purpose. The implication hung in the air, heavy and chilling. Human history was riddled with proof of their resilience, their determination. And now, the galaxy was waking a force that had long been tempered by conflict, sharpened by necessity. Perhaps, the scientists thought, humanity was not the sleeping dragon of their myths. Perhaps they were the fire it had always carried.